I don't throw darts at a board. I bet on sure things. Read Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Every battle is won before it's ever fought. Think about it. The most valuable commodity I know of is information. Wouldn't you agree?
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
A, B, C. A, always B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. The show goes on!
It's Wednesday night and fantasy football is on the agenda. Grab a seat and let's get down to business. It's time for the Fantasy Boardroom. Here's your host, Tycoon.
And welcome to the Fantasy Boardroom. I am your host, as always, Tycoon. Welcome back, baby. We're back to almost the regular schedule. As you probably guessed, this is not Wednesday night. The holiday weekend took up a little more personal time than expected, so I wasn't able to complete the research and rankings that I needed to do to put on this episode. So I'm a day late, $1 short, but the information is still good, so don't worry about that. Tonight's episode is Catch These Rankings. That is because why? We are diving into wide receivers this evening. We are going to go through who's not ranked high enough, who's ranked too high, and we're going to skip the whole who's just right part because they're just right. Just take them where they are. If they're not on the list, they're probably in the appropriate realm, unless they're outside of the top 36, because that's all we're really looking at today. We have no guest tonight. They will resume soon. Don't you worry. We'll have a little more fun banter going on, but for now, we're just diving into players. And before we get started, I do want to once again give a shout out to Ryan McDowell, Scott Fish. Scott Fish Bowl 12 is upon us. Live drafts have started. They were done in Chicago and Atlanta over 4th of July weekend. More commencing this weekend. And in Los Angeles, we will be beginning next weekend. So also shout out to Trophy Smack, who will be hosting the live drafts for the Los Angeles division. Cannot wait to participate. Going to be an absolute blast. Sounds like they are really working real hard to put on a hell of an event and do Scott Fish proud. I'm sure he will be. Again, I already mentioned we are going to get into our wide receiver discussion. We've been throwing some dynasty thoughts. We'll talk a little prop resources. And I'm actually going to give a few bets for you because they have not started yet this evening. And if you have time to go on and take advantage of those, I encourage you to do so. And even before we jump into that, just want to also give one final shout out to myself. Yeah, fresh cut finally. My first haircut in 2 years. Never really grown my hair my entire life. Took advantage of COVID time. Got one haircut, that first summer. Have let it go since, and I gotta say, it feels so good to be back to this. Long hair is too much maintenance. I'm just too lazy for that. It extends that whole routine far too long. This is much better, much better. Love it. So, prop bets. Let's dive into it. Baseball is in season. There are still 3 games yet to start this evening, and have a pick from, well, at least the first 2. I actually don't remember if I have one from the final game, the Seattle game. I think I do. But we'll begin with San Diego and San Francisco. For the Padres, Joe Musgrove over 6.5 strikeouts. The Giants are strikeout kings. He's going to, I don't want to say soar over that, but he is very, very likely going to exceed 6.5 strikeouts. And Logan Webb under 2.5 earned runs. That's right. Going with my boy Logan. He's just been on a roll recently. And I think at home versus the Padres should have little trouble keeping it, to 2 runs or less while he is out there. And in the Dodgers-Cubs game, Tony Gonsolin over 17.5 outs, just needs to go 6 innings. The Cubs are hapless. Gonsolin, again, has been pretty much lights out this season. I don't expect he'll have much trouble with Chicago at home. And lastly, we do have one Marco Gonzalez. That is right. Marco Gonzalez going up against the Toronto Blue Jays, who have up until recently been on a tear. They hit a skid in Oakland. They're really struggling there. But I think that's going to continue as they're still out on the road, traveling up the West Coast. His line's 5.5 hits. I think he gets out of there with 5 hits or less against Toronto, unless they just wake up out of nowhere here, which is very possible. They're a good squad, but Marco has also been pitching well. So again, Marco under 5.5 hits allowed. Tony Gonsolin over 17.5 outs. Logan Webb under 2.5 earned runs, and Joe Musgrove over 6.5 strikeouts. Those are all available on Sleeper. You're a fantasy crowd if you're watching this, so hop on the Sleeper, go into the squads area. I believe some of those lines are up on Prize Picks as well. Didn't take a look there today. I was more focused on Sleeper today, so go take advantage. Go make yourself some money. Let's win together tonight. Now we can finally dive into the football here, and we're going to jump into the wide receiver. So, unless otherwise mentioned, we're discussing 2022 redraft PPR format. And we are, like I kind of alluded to, we're going to mix it up a little bit this week. It was a little bit too listy for me last week. Don't just like running down names, especially when we got to the appropriately priced players, as, again, it's kind of obvious, no really real reason to say, yeah, Jonathan Taylor, RB1, or whoever. You know what, Eli Mitchell, 23. Okay, great. Doesn't really matter to mention at the moment when it's that near ADP. So we're just going to skip that whole nonsense. But we are going to dive right into the wide receivers that I am above consensus on, like more than most. And we'll begin with Rashad Bateman. Duh. If you didn't see that coming, again, you're probably new. That's okay. My love for Shotty B really knows no bounds. I love Rashad Bateman. Advocated for drafting him everywhere in Dynasty last year, trading for him, whatever it took. I hope he's on your roster now in Dynasty, and still recommend you try to get him as soon as you can in Dynasty because he is underpriced. Now, this season, though, just focusing solely on 2022, his ADP is currently at wide receiver 38, and he's at 91 overall. Now, last week I said Travis Etienne was the best value available currently in fantasy drafts, and I maintain that. Bateman is right behind him. He is got to be number 2 in my mind right now. I mean, he's wide receiver 38. That's just outrageous. This is easily the largest chasm I have between my rankings and the current ADP of anybody on the board here. So we'll get to that in a moment. As far as this season goes, I'm predicting a huge season from Lamar, and we'll get to him next week as well. I'm expecting an MVP level season from Lamar, in fact, and I do think that's going to include quite a bit of Mr. Rashad Bateman. Now, obviously, Mark Andrews is still around, but Bateman is the wide receiver 1 in town with Hollywood Brown now out. So he's off to Arizona, and Bateman is the most talented receiver that Lamar's had in his career so far. That's just that simple. I'm not counting Andrews as a receiver, so I'm not saying pass catcher. Relax. Although I do think Bateman will prove to be, of course, better than him as well, but we'll give that a little more time. Rashad's my wide receiver 20, folks. I mean, that's an 18 spot gap just in positional rankings. I haven't really done my full big board overall, but 91, I'm sure I would probably a good 25 to 30 spots, a good 2.5, 3 rounds above consensus there when it comes to Bateman. Just be ready for it. Lamar's going to go off. Bateman's going to be part of it. He's going to be a big part of helping Lamar to be able to do that because he is simply an excellent player. And as my guy Derek Brown would say, if you're not on the player before the breakout, then you're too late. So make sure you're on him before his cost goes through the roof. Make sure you're getting yourselves who I think is going to be a solid wide receiver 2, in the bottom end of that, but still startable every week. Change that 91st overall. I mean, we're pushing the end of the 8th round. That's disrespectful. We use that word a lot here, but there is a lot of that going around. So again, shout out Debro, Scott Fishbowl of in My Chemical Romance division. Thanks for the saying. That stuck with me the other day, and I just had to use it. So wheels up on Rashad, baby. Wide receiver 20 this year. Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is another one. Now, Jeudy versus Cortland Sutton has been an extremely hot debate in the Twitter sphere and just in general in fantasy circles this offseason. Who is going to be Russ's wide receiver 1? That's what everyone is arguing about. Huh. As if we all know. Well, I mean, I do. It's going to be Jerry Jeudy. That's who it's going to be. Why? Because he's more talented than Cortland Sutton. And Sutton does nothing when they play together. That's really what it is. He outperforms them whenever they take the field together. What more do you want? I mean, Sutton's a fine player. We've seen him excel. That said, again, he's done virtually nothing on the field with Jeudy. The splits are absolutely staggering, and I wish I had actually saved them here in my notes, but I think it's like 13 yards a game. I mean, it's pathetic. Now, I understand that it's been Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock and some garbage rolling through a quarterback, but that's still pretty damning, in my opinion. Now, with that said, I do think Russ can support both of them. Now, how much? Different story. But he'll be able to support them both adequately, at least. They'll both be relevant. But I do think we're finally going to get that Jeudy breakout that I called for last year when I wrote my article in June advocating for you to trade for Jerry Jeudy last offseason before the Broncos upgraded this offseason at the quarterback position. And that's exactly what happened. Now everybody wants Jerry Jeudy. He's very expensive. I'm not sure I'm willing to pay current market value in Dynasty, as he's been, I think, overcorrected there in some instances. That's going to be a very league-specific player, a manager-specific player. But I hope you got him last year at a very, very cheap price, because now we're about to finally see him ascend. Right now he's going currently as the wide receiver 29, which is wild, and that actually varies a little bit more site to site, but this is going off of Fantasy Pros consensus ADP, so that's where 29 is coming from, and woof, that is low. 68 overall. I mean, end of the 6th round. Woo. He's my wide receiver 16. He's going to be a very, that upper mid tier of wide receiver 2s. I mean, there'll be some stinkers in there for sure, but in the AFC West, there are going to be a lot of high-scoring games. Judy's going to be part of that. It's that simple. He's going to be the apple of Russ's eye. When it comes to Jerry Jeudy, let's ride. We'll keep this one short and sweet. Stephon Diggs. Hardly a big gap. He's ranked as a top 5 receiver, right? Wide receiver 5. 11th overall. I think he has a strong chance of going wide receiver 1 overall. One of my favorite picks on the board simply because of that potential. Now, I only have him bumped up to 3. I do have him behind Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. I simply can't justify that in terms of rankings, but I mean, they have just as good of a shot as finishing wide receiver 1 overall. But Diggs going to be in probably the best offense in football, playing with one of the most talented, one of the best quarterbacks in football, coming off of a couple of prolific years. I mean, it's going to be impossible to exceed what he did a couple of years ago, but still a very fine last year when many perceived it as a bit of a struggle. I'd take this guy as high as 6 overall. I mean, honestly, after my top 3 running backs that I have ranked and behind Kupp and Jefferson, he's the next guy I want. It's a no-brainer. Smash. He is one of all the top receivers, the one I think I have the least doubt about. The most safety there, in my opinion. Next one is also not really a huge bump up, but again, I'm really compelled to mention him just because the disrespect has been outrageous, outlandish this offseason. It's stunning that it continues to be this way for Deontay. Now, I know those of him who are supporters are very loud, like myself. Will argue, last year it had to be drops don't matter. We worked through it. I thought we worked through all the issues this year in terms of people understanding this guy is simply an elite player, but I guess not. Deontay, he's wide receiver 14, which is respectful. I'll give him that. Like he's being drafted relatively appropriately, but it's more just about the discourse. he's going to be an absolute target monster for Mitch. It's absolute target monster. And yes, it is going to be Trubisky that starts the season. Now, it might be Pickett down the line. Sure, it doesn't really matter. Either one is a massive upgrade over the 2021 version of Ben Roethlisberger. And Deontay is, again, going to be a PPR monster, only he's going to have more scoring upside with Trubisky playing quarterback than with Ben. So might be more touchdown opportunity. That's what I'm most excited about. So even if there's a small chance that his targets go down marginally, I don't think it'll be much, but there's a chance it goes down just a little bit because Trubisky might be willing to hold on to the ball a little bit longer and throw it a little bit further. Fantastic. Yeah, there's not going to be as many of those 3, 4, 5 yard quick slants or anything like that for Deontay. So that's part of where I think people are concerned, but I don't really think you need to be. He's still the most talented player on that offense, and he will get the ball from the quarterback, whoever that may be, Mitchell Trubisky. Lastly, we're going to take a ride on the rookie train, simply because I think he is presenting value currently, and that is one Drake London. Now, there is some pretty understandable hesitation when it comes to London. I get it. It's Atlanta. Anything Atlanta that's not Kyle Pitts, if you're skeptical, fair. Me too, to a degree. But when it comes to London, Marcus Mariota is going to have to throw the ball to somebody besides Pitts sometimes. And that person is going to be Drake London. I mean, he's a top-tier prospect. He's talented as all get out. And I don't think he'll have much trouble settling in there as the wide receiver one in Atlanta. Again, not much competition. Certainly the most talented body stepping onto that field in that position group anyways. He's big. He's strong. He's got magnetic hands. Runs clean routes. The guy, he's going to be a force. Very, very strong player. Obviously, a little bit of an NFL acclimation period. Receivers sometimes take a little bit, but I think he'll get off to a pretty quick start. He was my number 2 overall player in Dynasty rookie drafts, any format, behind only Breece Hall. He was my wide receiver 1, of course. And I, again, think he's going to just make an immediate impact. Right now, he's going 40th off the board in the wide receiver group. But I think he's going to just crack into starting territory come season's end in terms of the final rankings and be there wide receiver 34. So 6 slot bump, but that's probably worth a roundish, a little more than a round when it comes to that part of the draft. So he's a guy I would take my chances on versus some of the receivers that are there. I mean, right there going around London, Robert Woods. Yeah, I'd rather have London. Juju, they give me London. Treylon Burks is around there. Yeah, see, Brandon Ayuk, I might rather take. Hell, Gabriel Davis is where. There's Gabriel Davis. I would probably rather. Nah, I don't know. I'm just sick of Gabriel Davis. He's bumped way down, and I would not do that. I have him up at 34. And we've got our boy, what up, Tycoon, a.k.a. the Fantasy CEO, the best dressed man in fantasy football, a.k.a. They like to call me a.k.a. I've changed screen names a few times on Sleeper and whatnot, so they just like to give me a hard time. So what's up, Anthony? I like to think he's the CEO there over at Get Right. Get Right is what's up. Make sure you're giving them a follow. Anthony, Frank, Dustin, and Classic Mike. Tremendous team, tremendous group, good friends of mine. Make sure you're checking them out. And now we'll get back. So Drake kind of wraps up who we are higher on. Now, who are lower on? Some of these names are not going to make everybody happy. Probably not the first 2 in particular, but, well, that's why we're talking about lower than consensus. It's not going to be popular because it's against what is popular. But I hope you heed this advice and avoid these traps at their price. Not bad players, traps at their price. I need to drive that home. Especially before I say this first name. CeeDee Lamb, baby. Fine player, absolutely. But he's going as the 7th receiver off the board, and that is just too rich for my blood. I didn't knock him down that much. Wide receiver 10, still top 10. There's still some respect being shown. Just relax. I know a Cowboy fan or two might be upset, but The highest Dak Prescott's top receiver has finished in fantasy is as wide receiver 10 overall. So, I mean, I'm kind of putting him right there at the ceiling. So, hey, respectful, right? And that was 2019 Amari Cooper. Lamb was wide receiver 19 last year. Obviously, he outperformed his rookie year, but still only to the tune of wide receiver 19. I understand, not yet as the top receiver, but he's now going to get that chance. But wide receiver 7? I mean, ahead of guys like Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans. I just can't do it. Not above those guys. So just bump him to the end of the top 10. He gets his seat on the bus, but he's not priority boarding here. That's all I'm saying. Just temper expectations. That's all. He'll be really solid. He'll be really good. But he's not going to be a top 5 receiver or even threaten to, be pushing for like one of the top spots, top 3, top 5. So just take him. If you have some skeptical people, maybe you're in a league where people hate Cowboys and maybe you can get him around that wide receiver 10-12 range, then jump on it. But if you're on the board and you see him on the if you're on the Glock and you see him on the board with somebody like Tyreek Hill and you take Lamb instead, please just don't. That's all I'm saying. Just don't. Deebo Samuel. Now, this one really hurts my heart because I am a 49ers fan. But he's just built up too much from last season. I think it's a very real possibility and quite likely that last season was going to be the peak Deebo fantasy season. He'll have great seasons and he's a great player. But I think that is going to be the best fantasy performance that we're going to get out of one Deebo Samuel. Wide receiver 6. I've got him at wide receiver 12. Wide receiver 6 is just too rich. I mean, the fact of the matter is no matter how high I am on Trey Lance, which is sky high, I still expect that there are going to be some bumps in the road, and Deebo constantly carries injury risk. I mean, he missed some time even a bit last year. It's part of his style of play. I mean, he's a hard-nosed player. He doesn't shy away from contact. He invites it. And sometimes that's just going to tag him a little. I mean, he's kind of like Kittle in that regard. You almost have to expect to miss a couple of games from him until it doesn't happen. And I also expect further growth from Brandon Ayuk. I expect that Kittle will start to be featured more again this season. So I don't see anything that indicates to me that Deebo is going to be able to maintain that real elite fantasy wide receiver position. He'll still be awesome. He'll still be great. And he's still going to have some huge weeks. He'll still get those fat pop weeks. Don't get me wrong. We're still going to get a couple of 200-yard, 2 and 3 touchdown days. Yeah, I think so. Because I think this offense is going to be tremendous. But I don't think you're going to see as consistent huge performances from Deebo. I don't think you're going to see quite as many 100-plus games with touchdowns. It's just going to drop off a little bit. He'll be a better real-life player than fantasy, which for me is fine, but not so good for our fantasy teams. He'll still be great, but again, last season was peak fantasy Deebo. Not peak Deebo, peak fantasy Deebo. Next one. And frankly, my issue with this player is not the player at all. My issue with this player is Carson Wentz, which means I'm talking about F1 Terry McLaurin. The guy is an absolute stud. I love Terry. Love Terry. I hate his situation. I hate his quarterback. He's not super expensive there. Wide receiver 17. I mean, that's a reasonable price tag. But in that range, I mean, that 16, 17 through like 21, 22, no, pretty similar. But I'd rather have guys like DJ Moore, Mike Williams, who are currently going behind him, than I would F1 at this point. Wentz, gross, disgusting. Wide receiver 21. And Darnell Mooney is the final one that I'm lower on. Again, not anything really against the player. Mooney is an excellent player, but I still am going to need to see a little something more from the Bears, just in general. I have my doubts about the coaching staff that they hired. We'll see how that goes. We'll see how Fields continues to develop. I hope they don't stunt Fields' development because I do think he has a lot of promise. I like Fields. And I do think there will be some good weeks, but I'm still kind of concerned about the offense as a whole, and I think that's really going to limit Mooney's weekly ceiling and week to week consistency and ceiling. I think you're going to have a lot of dud weeks, a lot of wasted times that you threw him in your lineup, could have left him on your bench, gotten the same production or similar. I just don't think you can get too many big days. I think you'll see good real life growth, hopefully, from Fields and Mooney and the Bears, but this is one where I do really need to see a little more in this case. It's more about the staff than the players. I just don't know if they can put together yet a competent offense in today's NFL. And now we'll jump to just some kind of sneaky late grabs, the sleepers, so to speak. The guys I'd like to grab, given their very cheap cost. One would be Chris Olave. I think he also has a tremendous chance to surpass London, actually, to be the rookie wide receiver one for 2022. Why? Because Michael Thomas is a mystery at this point. Who knows what's going on with him, how much he'll play, if he'll play. Alvin Kamara almost certainly is going to start the season suspended, probably 6 games. So we'll see what happens there. But there's a very, very likely possibility that Chris Olave is going to be the most talented skill position player for the New Orleans Saints for the first 6 weeks of the season. I think he'll have a chance to carry some momentum even when some of these other players return. Jameis is going to be looking to him often, I think. Pretty simple. I mean, he'll establish himself early, gain that credibility, gain that trust with his teammates, and be a factor moving forward. So he is in a prime position to be able to do so, a chance I am willing to take at wide receiver 46. This next one, I know, it's really, really gross. It's disgusting, actually. Kenny Golladay. Yes, I know. But Kenny Golladay. We've seen the guy be a wide receiver one before. We've seen him be an elite receiver before. So this isn't that outlandish of a thought. I'm more really just optimistic about Dable and his ability to unlock some of Daniel Jones' potential. That's what I'm really banking on here. And if he's able to do that, if he can just get a little something there out of DJ, Golladay is going to be one to benefit massively. Danny can throw a decent deep ball, and that's where Golladay can come into play. So I'm not in love with him. But again, he's been a wide receiver one in the past, and if Daniel Jones can be competent, Golladay should at least be a useful player. I mean, he's still owed a lot of money. He's still going to be put on the field unless he is injured. I mean, it's still a gamble, but at the cost of wide receiver 55, hell yeah. Sign me up. We went into these receivers a little bit earlier on Denver's roster. Now we're going to actually move to one more, and that is Tim Patrick, the apple of many's eye. He's not a huge secret amongst some of the savvier players, which is why I'm stunned that the guy's ADP is wide receiver 64. Because really, it's a lot of the more dedicated, passionate players that are drafting at this time. So ADP should somewhat reflect that, but wide receiver 64 for a guy that a lot of sharp people are making sure is on their rosters. I mean, he's a good football player. I don't know what else to say. Strong football player. And if Sutton or Judy misses any time, we know we can step in and do a huge role and perform great. I mean, even as the third receiver on the roster, he could be pretty valuable with Russ now in town. So he's got far more upside than anybody going in his range down there at wide receiver 64, at least as far as I'm concerned. I mean, DJ Chark, Rondale Moore, John Dodson, Van Jefferson, George Pickens, Jameson Crowder. No, Tim Patrick over all of those guys. Every single one of them. It's not even close. I don't know exactly where I rank him since I only went through the top 36 for this, but the guy's a steal at that price. Free. And lastly, and it's kind of gross as well, because it's a New England Patriots receiver being thrown to by Mac Jones. But, hey, it's a good player. Kendrick Bourne, let's go. Now, I know Devontae Parker's in town now. He's had durability issues himself over the years. his personality is one that I'm really wondering how it's going to jive with Belichick. He doesn't seem like a very Belichick type of player. So we'll see how that goes. What kind of vibe comes from that and how much he's really used in that case. But what we do know is that Mac Jones already has chemistry with Kendrick Bourne, who is in fact a good receiver and who is in fact an excellent red zone target. He'll probably be wide receiver 40 something by the time all shakes out, but that is a hell of a lot better than wide receiver 85 as he's currently being drafted. So again, just at an essentially free price tag, if you need a receiver there, some depth there at the end of your bench when you're drafting, Bourne is a guy. Definitely a guy. He's going to have several big weeks. Well, it's, again, with Mac Jones, a second-year guy, I'm not the highest on, is not exactly a volume king when it comes to passing. Still, where Bourne really excels is in the red zone. I'm not expecting really much from Jonnu Smith. Hunter Henry, yeah, we'll see. But Bourne will be a main red zone target when they're choosing to pass in the red zone. So, take him. I mean, simple. Guy scores touchdowns. And after that, those are the notable guys. Nobody else really caught my eye as an extreme value one way or the other. I have relatively different ranks. I think Allen Robinson's probably going to end up a little bit higher than where he's going, wide receiver 32, but not what I'm going to pound the table on. DeAndre Hopkins, his end ranking will probably be something similar to the wide receiver 35 he's currently going as, but he's a guy that I think will have a top tier level of performance when he returns. It's only that low because of his injury. So when he comes back, you can expect him to be a top 15-ish level of receiver. So I would probably take him before that just to make sure I have him for that end of the run, depending on how far he falls. If he falls down to 35, have him take him there. So there's other values, but who we talked about earlier is where to primarily focus. And many of those values should sustain well into August. So you'll have time to be able to take advantage of that information. And with that, we're getting close to wrapping up. So make sure that you are enjoying the props. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at @FF_Tycoon. But there's also a link to Discord there where I'm putting out daily picks. There are picks being posted to Twitter daily. And make sure you're playing them either at Prize Picks. Sign up with code Collective, KOLLECTIV, for a $100 deposit match, or up to a $100 deposit match on your first deposit. You can also sign up on Sleeper for squads. If you're already on Sleeper, great. Just shoot me a DM again at @FF_Tycoon. If not, reach out to me on Twitter. I'll have a link for you. Sign up there. You use my referral code, again, @FF_Tycoon, and you will get a $100 bonus regardless of how much you deposit. And it's actually nice to have both Prize Picks and Sleeper available. Different lines are posted at different times. Sometimes different props, period, are up on either site. So it's just good to have the option. I'm actually really, really enjoying Sleeper. The squad aspect is fun because you can choose to make your cards visible, which if your squad does, everybody's sharing. It's kind of fun to see who's tailing who. When we all win, we're winning together. Family bets are regular. In my squad, the squad, again, reach out to me for a link. We are having an absolute blast lately. We're winning. Everybody's having fun. Everybody's talking. It's active. It's interactive. And it's fantastic as we bide our time for fantasy football. And we're already there in Sleeper, so it's easy to continue to take care of our fantasy needs, particularly our dynasty teams. This Sleeper is just a great app, continuing to ascend. Support them. Great group, great app. Hopefully they continue to improve. The props and squad area is not perfect, but it's improved. It's continuing to improve pretty regularly, so may they continue to do so. Sleeper's generally done a good job at product improvement, so I hope that doesn't stop. And this season, again, Rogue Risks will be coming. We'll be sharing more and more of our, I'll always be sharing my picks, but more of the team will be sharing our picks. We'll have our Thursday night football picks. We'll have the Taco Tuesday picks for prize picks, Taco Tuesday specials every single week. And again, near daily picks over on Discord. Check my Twitter profile. All sports are covered. And again, Rogue, we are no longer the Fantasy Collective. Rogue Bets, Fantasy Rogues, we will be in full force again soon, just another few weeks. It's been a wild offseason, but we are close to pulling things together. We'll have news to share with you hopefully by the end of the month, something that we can announce to you. We will see. Probably be in that range, though. And we'll get at it. So thank you once again for joining the boardroom. This meeting is adjourned.